Good evening, everyone. Hello, hello. Second time today. So hopefully some of you caught the live stream that I did this afternoon on the capture of the Long Island serial killer. That was a crazy one, and that's going to be a crazy one for probably for the foreseeable future. I think there's a lot more to come out about that. But today we are back talking about JonBenet Ramsey. JonBenet, of course, was brutally murdered in the early hours of the 26th of December, 1996. So in just a few hours, I'm going from news that was just incredibly shocking and unexpected to a case that has been troubling everyone for the last 25 years. So, yeah. But there's more, well, there's not new information that's come out about JonBenet Ramsey. And I went through the details of that in my live stream on this channel a couple of days ago, Thursday, I think I did that. And I did say at the end of that live that I'd be back because John Ramsey, JonBenet's dad, was to appear on Court TV. So he did indeed appear on Court TV last night. So we're going to review that and see what John has to say about this situation. Now, when Court TV supposedly broke this story on Thursday, they said it was a new confession. And of course, this wasn't a new confession. The guy who they are talking about is someone called Gary Oliva, who confessed to JonBenet's murder just hours after the murder to a friend. He called a friend, crying, distraught, saying he'd hurt a little girl in Boulder, Colorado. And this guy, Gary, had ties with Boulder, Colorado. He was living in the area. Actually, he was picking his mail up from the church, which was only a few doors away from JonBenet's house. So it's intriguing that this guy was able to tell his friend about JonBenet's murder before it had even hit the media. But that, is that a surefire reason to believe this guy, to believe that he did it? No, because he had links with the area. So everybody in the local area was talking about it. Everybody knew, like the Ramseys were inviting people in to the house to try to find her, because in the first few hours, they thought she'd been kidnapped. They didn't realize that she was lying dead, brutally murdered in the basement of their home. So the fact that this Gary Oliva character knew about JonBenet's murder in hours isn't surprising given his connections. But the friend, whose name was Michael Vale, kept in touch. They'd known each other a little in high school, and they become, I want to say, friends, like close friends, but they were contacts. They kept in touch. And Gary Oliva was well known to Michael Vale in ringing him up and writing to him these really dark thoughts, you know, thoughts of murder and cannibalism and you name it. Gary Oliva has those fantasies. So it was only when the story broke the day after, on the 27th of December 1996, in the media, that Michael Vale thought, oh my word, like my friend who, yes, he's dark. Yes, he tells me some really dark things and dark fantasies, but this guy has confessed to me. So he called the cops. He called in a tip and the police didn't listen. Boulder PD, the most ineffective police department in probably the state of Colorado, by the looks of things, certainly in 1996, absolutely atrocious investigation. Certainly, you know, in the initial stages, those all important initial stages, when so much evidence was lost from that crime scene. So he didn't hear anything. So he called back 3 months later and still didn't hear anything. And it was only 4 years after that that the police actually bothered to consider Gary Oliva a suspect in her case. So this is not a new confession at all. So Court TV were wrong in saying this was a new confession. Gary Oliva went to prison in 2016 on child porn charges. So this guy is a pedo. And continued to write to his friend Michael Vale, continuing to confess, like doubling down, tripling down on this confession. So Court TV broke it, but it was actually the US Sun, the newspaper, the US Sun, these guys, and I don't like the Sun as a newspaper, but it's the Sun that has been running this story that Court TV have picked up on. So it's the investigative journalists at the Sun that have got these letters from Michael Vale. So this is an excerpt from one of the letters to Michael Vale. So this is Gary Oliva. So he would have been in his early 30s when JonBenet was murdered. And then there he is. There's Gary Oliva at the vigil that they had to mark the 1 year of her murder. There he is, right at the front. And then this is an excerpt. Please don't hate me. I'm sorry I turned scum, but can't read it. But even when you first met me, I told you I had wanted to kill children. It's just that the one death I'm being executed for, he's not being executed for. He's fantasizing. He's not being executed. He's in prison on child porn charges, not for anything to do with JonBenet. He's never been charged. He's considered a suspect, but he's never been charged with the murder of JonBenet Ramsey. So the one I'm being executed for was an accident. When I met JonBenet, she took away that horrible craving to kill kids that you know me for. She changed me into a new person, but it's okay. I've killed so many children, I've lost count, I think that says. So we don't know that he's killed loads of children. We do know that he's got some really dark proclivities. Not only is he interested in child P, he's also interested in necrophilia. He was breaking into the University of Colorado so he could go and sleep next to a skeleton and lick its bones, which is utterly bizarre. But according to the US Sun, Gary Oliva was DNA tested in 2000, and sources say he was not found to be the match recovered from the crime scene. Now, that's not what was said on court TV. That's not what was said on court TV. John Ramsey seems to believe that this guy, Gary Oliva, has never been DNA tested. Now, let me be very clear. The DNA that they collected from the crime scene wasn't from the surrounding crime scene, like the murder scene, because they didn't bother to test it before it had become completely contaminated, because the police were just awful at their job. They just weren't equipped to deal with a homicide, especially not one of a 6-year-old girl. Now, there was DNA, though. On JonBenet's underwear, there was a couple of stains, like bloody-looking stains. And JonBenet had been sexually assaulted, sadly. I do have a copy of her autopsy report. So it's pretty graphic. JonBenet died of... Let me just put this on screen. I'm just going to show you the diagnosis here. So this is the diagnosis, the cause of death. Ligature strangulation. Okay, so circumferential ligature with associated ligature furrow of neck. So she'd been strangled with a... Not everyone is in Cordis. Bella, this guy's in Cordis because he's in prison. Is in prison. So even if their DNA tested him in the 2000, when he went to prison, his DNA, even if they didn't have it until he went to prison, it would have made a hit at that point. If only touch DNA was available to test back then, well, it wouldn't have made any difference because they didn't even bother testing the crime scene until it had become completely contaminated. So anyway, the ligature was made from a cord, which also had some DNA on it, and a broken paintbrush. So fashioned in the style of a garrote. So she was strangled like that. So she had petechial hemorrhaging of her neck and petechial hemorrhaging of the surfaces of the eyes and the skin of the face. That's very common in strangulation. I know we're talking about a 6-year-old girl and it's horrendous. Petechial hemorrhage is when all the tiny blood vessels in the eyes and the face burst, they create these little like spots, like a rash. It's very characteristic of strangulation. But she also had a fractured skull. So she had a scalp contusion. So contusion's a bruise. So a scalp was bruised. And then a comminuted fracture of the right side of her skull. So that means that the fracture was in more than one place. So it's like she'd been hit by something hard, and it created like a hole, and the fracture was kind of like when you break glass, I guess. You get that kind of shattering effect. Now, obviously, it's not as obvious on bone as it is in glass, but that's the kind of fracture that we're talking about. And then a linear pattern of bruising of the right cerebral hemisphere, so that's inside her brain. And then the membranes between the skull and the brain were bleeding. So she had bleeding in the membranes of her brain due to the fracture. And then she also had small bruising on the tips of the temporal lobe, which is at the side of the brain. So she was hit on the right side, which caused bleeding under the membranes, and it created bruising in the front right and the side. She also had abrasion on her right cheek, on her right shoulder, left lower leg, and the back of her left leg. abrasion and SA, and then a ligature of her right wrist, which I think is weird. Toxicology showed no blood or alcohol in her system. So the cause of death is asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma, so a fractured skull. Now, I think the fractured skull alone would probably have been enough to kill her, potentially, without treatment, but the strangulation was the main diagnosis, if you will, the main cause of death. So I just thought I'd show you that, just to be very, very clear just how violent and horrible this murder was, and how badly the torch on the kitchen bench fit the wound on the head perfectly, according to cold case type team. Well, the killer possibly could have picked up a torch and hit her with it? Possibly. She was obviously hit by something. And if I remember rightly, the torch didn't contain any prints, if I remember rightly. So the killer obviously wiped the torch, if that's indeed the instrument that was used. So let's listen to what John Ramsey has to say. Now, John Ramsey is 79 years old, and it was confirmed many years ago now that none of the Ramsey family fit this DNA profile that was found in her underwear. So JonBenet, the DNA spots in her underwear were a mixed profile. So there was a profile of JonBenet's because of the blood, and an unidentified male person. So possibly if the half moon claw marks of her neck and 8 to 10 cc's of blood, less than a teaspoon and a half on her skull, indicate a head injury likely happened last. Well, that's kind of what Gary Oliva would have us believe, because he said that it didn't mean for her to die, but it's actually the strangulation that's the main cause of death. But the DNA, unidentified male DNA in 2 spots. Now, there has been a lot of talk about this. The reason why they've only got a small amount of DNA is because they didn't bother to collect enough samples and do their job. I assume that there would have been, just a minute, let me just plug my computer in or else I'm going to lose you. There we go. All right, are we charging? No, we're not charging because the plug's not on. Oh, the plug is on. What's going on? What's going on here? Oh, there we go. We're charging now. All right. Yeah, so this DNA does not fit the profile of any of the Ramseys. So even though John and Patsy Ramsey were indicted for JonBenet's murder by a grand jury, the DA refused to go forward with the prosecution. Why is that? Because what the police had done is right from day one, had a massive amount of tunnel vision, as have the majority of the people who've talked about it on social media. I 100% believe that the parents and Burke, the brother, are innocent. 100%. That's just my opinion, obviously. And these handwriting specialists that have said that Patsy Ramsey's writing style is the same as the ransom note, I don't even know what you're looking at, because they don't look anywhere the same, like the same to me. But hey, I'm not an expert. All right, so we're going to play this, and I'm just going to play the parts where John is speaking. He's being interviewed by Vinny Politan from Court TV. The link to this, and also the actually, I don't think I've put the Irish Sun article in the description, but I will after, if you want to take a read of it. The Irish Sun have actually published quite a few pieces over the last few days, and other media have picked up on it as well. Patsy Ramsey, I think she died after the DA had said that he wasn't going to prosecute. That's exactly right, Princess. That's exactly right. The police messed up from the beginning, letting people roam around the house. Absolutely. Because the Ramseys thought that JonBenet had been kidnapped. So they were like ringing around people. Like they had all these friends in the house. And it was John Ramsey that found JonBenet. Like the police didn't, like John carried her upstairs, as you would do. Like John wasn't thinking about, oh, I've got to not touch her and secure this crime scene. That's what John was just thinking, my baby girl's dead. And carried her upstairs. Well, there you go. Automatically, you've disrupted this crime scene. Now, a lot has been made about this unknown DNA in the in JonBenet's underwear. And, you know, people have said, well, it could be a sneeze. Someone in the factory sneezed on the underwear. Well, it was just 2 spots. So a sneeze isn't, a sneeze sprays. It's not concentrated, is it? Anyway, you can have that argument if you would like to. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the killers. It really doesn't necessarily mean it's the killers, but it's all they've got. So because it's there, a defense would use it. You know, if they charge somebody who didn't fit that DNA profile, the defense would have a field day. The defense would say, well, the DNA in her underwear that's mixed with her own blood doesn't match. Yeah, consistent with that found on her long johns and under her fingernails. The problem is there's so little of it. The problem is that so little of the sample was able to be fully profiled. It's not 100% that they could use that. Anyway, let's play this. Like I said, I'm not going to play the whole thing. The whole thing's 37 minutes because they did a whole feature on it. I'm just playing the bits of John. All right. So let me know that the sound is okay as I press play.
For joining us. So, you know, for the public, we see the headlines. We're putting 2 and 2 together here, and we're like, this seems obvious that this is someone that should really be looked at. How familiar are you with this guy, Gary Oliva?
Well, I'm quite familiar with him. You used the term this person should have been at the top of the radar for the police. Unfortunately, we were at the top of the radar, and they ignored people like this in the beginning. Oliva was referred to us by the Boulder District Attorney for follow-up by our detectives because I think he felt the police would not follow it up properly. And when I heard the circumstantial evidence around this guy, I said to our attorneys, this is the guy. And they said, whoa, don't do a Boulder police on us yet. We don't know that yet. We got a lot of digging to do. So we knew about him early on, and he was certainly right up the top of the list of possible suspects for us. And but there's only so much a private citizen could do in this kind of investigation. And but he's circumstantially, he's very, very compelling as a suspect.
Now,
no question.
Circumstantially, he absolutely is. He absolutely is. In his past, he's a pedo. He's in prison right this moment. As we speak, he's in prison. He's due for release on parole in 2025. I 100% hope, 100,000,000% hope that they do not release him, because that guy is dangerous. He will reoffend. He absolutely will reoffend. He's obsessed with JonBenet. I'll show you actually. This is again from the Irish Sun. Somebody asked me just before. I'll talk about JedMatch shortly. I talked about it the other day. I did a members live, a really detailed members live on JonBenet and talked a lot about it. That was a few months ago. But if over on MichelleAfterDark, if you're a member, go and check out that live, because I went through the whole case. Hold on a minute. There was something about handwriting. Can this guy's handwriting be matched with the ransom note? To be honest, I'm not that big on handwriting analysis, not just because I'm not an expert, but because it's so easy to disguise your handwriting. It's really easy to disguise your handwriting. But we can do a quick comparison if you want. Hold on a minute. JonBenet Ramsey ransom note. Let's find a good sample. Right. All right, I'm going to have to come out of this and share my whole screen to be able to put the two side by side. So just give me a second. All right, that's right. So that's just the first section of the ransom note. And then that's Gary Oliva's handwriting, but he's writing in caps. I mean, to me, they don't look the same, but I'm not an expert. But neither does this writing look like Patsy's either. So I think handwriting analysis is admissible in court. Correct me if I'm wrong. The misspellings and linguistic choices, or whether the language is feminine or masculine, what the tone is, how much pressure was used on the page. Well, the thing is that because this ransom note has been copied and that's, I think that just the sample that I've used there has been emboldened a little bit to make it clearer. And also they said that it was Patsy who'd written this because only the family would be aware of the $118,000 bonus that that John got from his company. But that's not true either, because the company had publicized how well they were doing. So it was possible to find out the bonuses if you had a mind to, if you wanted to. But I've always thought that it was somebody having revenge against John. But the other thing, though, regarding investigative genetic genealogy, absolutely, I think they should try to do that. But there's so little DNA left available. They'd have to use it all to do that process, because they can't just use the DNA sample that they've already profiled, because to do investigative genetic genealogy, they have to do a different type of DNA testing. I did an in-depth video on the difference between standard DNA testing and SNP testing, which is what they use for genealogy. In a video, it was related to Brian Koberger. I don't remember whether it is on this channel or Michelle After Dark, but it relates to any situation where there's the potential to do investigative genetic genealogy, that there's two different types of DNA testing. So go and check that out. So the quandary is, do they use all the DNA that's available to do investigative genetic genealogy, and without fully knowing until they actually do the test that there's enough of it? Because SNP testing that they use for genealogy needs more DNA, and under the current technology, needs more DNA than just a standard test. So that's the difficulty. All right, I'm gonna reshare Court TV now. So let's carry on with this.
There are a lot of people watching who know a lot about this case, but there's a good portion of people who don't know a lot about this case. I want you to follow up on this relationship between you and the Boulder police, because you're saying the district attorney is telling you about this because the DA doesn't believe that the Boulder police will investigate him. Can you give us a little more background on that?
Well, we learned a lot about what went wrong after the fact, several years after the fact in some cases. The Boulder police had no experience in homicide investigations. Their detectives, one of the detectives on the case was an auto theft investigator. And here he is investigating the murder of a child. And I've never faulted them for not having the experience. They're a small town. They don't have homicides, thankfully for them. What I do fault them for is refusing help from competent help that was offered to them early on. And that's the real second tragedy in this case, is that they, because of inexperience, poor leadership, and very arrogant people, refused help. And, we can handle this case. It's our case. And they very quickly concluded, well, it must be the parents. It's always the parents. We just got to assemble the evidence and prove it. And that's what they really set about to do from day one. And the first problem they came up with was unidentified male DNA on JonBenet's body. And they just kept that information secret from the district attorney and certainly from the media, because it conflicted with their conclusion. And one experienced prosecutor told me, I have never, ever seen a police department try to explain away unidentified male DNA in a sexual assault case. That's what they were trying to do, because they were convinced that we did it. And I was told by the district attorney several years later, their conclusion was based on their opinion that we didn't act right that morning, which is nonsense. But yet that's what drove their conclusion. And they tried desperately to prove it. And
I mean, how are you meant to act? How are you meant to act? So many people have listened to the 911 call from Patsy Ramsey and said that she had to be guilty because she wasn't upset enough, or she was too upset, or she was faking being upset. I mean, how is anybody meant to act? And the fact is that they had this 2.5-page ransom note saying that JonBenet would not be harmed if John went to take $118,000 out in cash and deliver it to a certain location. So initially, until JonBenet's body was found, which was at 1 p.m., and the 911 call was made at something past 5 in the a.m., so that entire morning, they were under the impression that they were dealing with a kidnapper, that JonBenet was alive and well, but she'd been kidnapped. And providing that they did everything that they were told, and they were going to have to wait for this phone call to get further instructions, they were assuming she was alive. So how are they meant to act? Yes, they're shocked. Yes, they're, but they're thinking that, well, how do we handle this? Do we pay the ransom and get our daughter back, or what? So what they're looking for is advice from the cops on how to deal with a kidnapping where a ransom has been demanded. They're not dealing with a murdered child until 1 p.m. when the police said, oh, well, you might as well just go and have a look around the house, and sent John off to look around the house. And he went down the basement and found her. So how were they meant to act that in those initial few hours? Ridiculous. But everybody says it. Everybody says it. We say it all the time. Oh, they're not acting, not upset enough, or they're faking it. Oh, that's just crocodile tears. We all do it. Police 101, check the property. Yeah, they'd had a quick look round. But they'd not sealed the place off. Because you'd think, right, in a missing child case or a missing persons case, you don't automatically have to seal the place off because you've got no indication when someone goes missing that a crime's been committed, not initially. So it's standard practice not to seal a crime scene off, to seal anywhere off, because there's no crime scene. However, in this instance, they had a ransom note inside the house. They had a kidnapper who'd come into the house to take JonBenet. So even if what this ransom note said was true, they had a crime scene. So it should have been sealed off. The family should have been made to leave, and all of their visitors should have been made to leave, and that should have been forensically tested, the whole place. So not just sitting around waiting for a phone call, and then the police get bored and say, oh, well, yeah, you might as well just go and have a look around. I mean, come on. It's dreadful. John and Patsy and friends did not pause, nor were they waiting for the expected phone call. Why were they not waiting with bated breath for the mentioned phone call? Well, how do we know they weren't? The phone call was due to, it's in the ransom note. I'll just get the full ransom note up. Hold on. Okay. Because there was a time when it was when they were gonna call. Hold on, I'm just gonna have to download this. It's not letting me look at it properly. Okay. Okay, I might as well just read it all to you. Oh, that's really small. Oh, I can't read that. I'll find. Actually, I've got, just bear with me a second. I've got the full note in my members live. So just a second. If I find it, I can put that on screen rather than trying to download. When was it? Here we go. All right. Okay. All right. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We do respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At the time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed. And if you wanted to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills and the remaining $18,000 $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you, listen, between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow. So they weren't waiting with bated breath that day because they were told that this kidnapper was going to ring the following day. So no, they didn't need to wait with bated breath until 8 o'clock the following day, the 27th. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. We monitor you getting the money early. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you. How's he going to get the money? It's Christmas. How's he going to get the money? I don't know about Colorado in 1996, but in the UK, the 26th of December, everything's shut. No, the 27th, I think banks reopen, so they could get it the following day. All right, so he can't get it early because it's a... And assuming he doesn't have $118,000 in cash in his house. All right, so if we manage to get the money earlier, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery or of the money and hence an earlier pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. 2 gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as the pokey, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand an 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good southern common sense of yours. It's up to you now, John. Victory. So that's the full note. All right, let's get back to this. So I don't know how they were meant to act. I really don't. Patricia, $9.99. Thank you so much. We all go to the bank on Christmas, right? Yeah, we do. Yeah. But unfortunately, you can knock and knock and knock, and you're not going to get any answer. The many people who have analysed this note say it was a female who was educated and smart. Not that educated, because it was full of spelling mistakes. So no, not that educated. Unless they're an educated person who just can't spell, I guess. And there's no way of knowing that was a female at all. Okay, banks would have been open on the 26th. It was a Thursday. All right, fair enough. It's just a national holiday for us. Like December 26th, there's nothing. You can't even get a train. It is very oddly worded. It's very oddly worded. It's like it's a joke. The fact that JonBenet was lying dead in the basement, you know, did the kidnapper intend to take her, but then decided not to? Misspelling was a decoy. Come on. Come on now. Decoy against what? Yeah, I know, Mel. All these experts, I know. I know. Right, let's carry on.
And, it wasn't possible. I mean, our attorneys told us, look, the system's broken. We can't fix the system, but we will promise you one thing: we'll destroy him in court. If this ever goes to trial, don't worry about it. 100% money back guarantee will destroy him, because it's absolute nonsense. So, our objective from the very beginning was to get the case into competent hands. And we petitioned the governor, we petitioned the state attorney general, didn't get any response. And it was very frustrating. And what was the date? I don't remember the date, but the new district attorney came in to office, and within a year or two took the case away from the Boulder police and set up a new investigative team. We met with the team, and they had the case for several years, 6 or 8 years, and they put together a case file. There was no case file had ever been developed or put together, and they started from scratch. And this, unfortunately, was 4 years after the murder, so it makes it very difficult.
You're playing catch up,
but at least they were trying.
Yeah, you're playing catch up.
Totally playing catch up.
Yeah, they always talk about the first 48 hours. Within the first 48 hours, this friend is allegedly making this phone call to police with this tip. Now, Luke Kenton included this photo I'm showing you right here, folks, from CBS of Gary Oliva at a vigil for JonBenet. It was in the article in the U.S. Sun. Oliva appears to be in the front row. It's a group paying respect to JonBenet Ramsey. He also appears to be holding a large folder. Kenton explained a little bit more about when and where this photo was taken earlier this week.
This vigil took place on the year anniversary of her death. So that was on Christmas night, I believe that was held.
So this is the... Oh, I'm muted, sorry. This is the journalist who has been instrumental in getting these articles published in the Sun. So this Gary guy used to walk about with this like art folder. Now, when he was arrested in 2016, he had a bunch of stuff that they found. Let me find it. It's just very, very alarming. So, okay. All right. So Oliva, who was homeless, was detained under a bridge near a railroad track on June 6, 2016. So this is when he was arrested for these child P charges. And his phone and other personal items were seized by investigators. So he had on his phone nearly 700 images depicting child P. Details about the images are redacted in the report. So the Sun has been getting all of these police reports. I can't find them. I've tried to find them and I can't find them. So I need to try harder. Maybe the Sun hasn't released them. I'm not sure. Additionally, 335 photos of and relating to JonBenet. So he clearly has an obsession with her. Now, is that because he killed her or because he fantasized about killing her? And since she was brutally murdered, that he can carry on this fantasy, but he didn't actually do it. And he's a fantasist. Some are regular photos of her, like found online. Of the photos, 19 were images of JonBenet's autopsy from photos that had previously leaked to the press in years past. So if you listen to the video that I made yesterday regarding the release of Gannon Stokes' autopsy photos, you'll realize my problem, my massive problem with anybody, now that's not just Savgirl, but anybody releasing autopsy photos, because these wacko nut jobs use them as porn. They use them. These wackos who are into necrophilia. It's just very, very alarming. That's why I believe it should be against the law for any court to release autopsy photos. Outside of a trial setting, there's absolutely no reason why any public member of the public should be able to view them. There was also many photos of what appear to be shrines to JonBenet. It's unknown where these shrines are located or if they were created by Oliva or not. Investigators also noted that a number of contacts in Oliva's phone referenced members of the Ramsey family, and several videos paying tribute to her were saved on the device. Numerous other images depicted scenes of cannibalism, torture, and mutilation of dead bodies. Along with those images were drawings believed to have been crafted by Oliva that depicted murder, dismemberment, and cannibalism. Yes, Kyle? All right, see you later. Images of children crying or otherwise appearing scared have been saved on his phone in large quantities, and dozens of images purporting to depict cannibalism and death. And then he had his sketchbook and a black rucksack that were also seized by the police. So he used to walk about with like notebooks and sketchbooks and stuff. So the fact that he's there with this kind of looks like an art folder at JonBenet's vigil is just really chilling, really chilling. So I can understand John Ramsey believing that he is circumstantially suspect number one. He ticks all the boxes. But I've always thought, given the ransom note, I've always thought it was a disgruntled co-worker or someone that John's firm had fired who decided to get revenge. That's what I've always thought. But I mean, who that might be, I've got absolutely no idea. Okay, let's just skip forward a little bit here and go back to John. It's sad when the family responsible. It's been said when family responsible, they pose the body more respectfully. I don't understand, right? Because the thing is, it's been like the number one theory amongst the Ramseys did it camp are that Burke, the little boy who was only 9, so JonBenet's older brother, who was only 9, hit her over the head with the torch or some other instrument and accidentally killed her. Now, a 9-year-old hitting a 6-year-old with a torch and accidentally fracturing her skull and killing her. Okay, I could go with that. I could go with that, you know, 9-year-olds don't know their own strength. Maybe he was mad and he just whacked her over the head and then they covered it up. But just the trauma to her body. Like, if Patsy Ramsey had seen Burke kill his sister, so she goes to the lengths of writing this ransom note, because this is an accident. This is completely unintentional, you know, so it's not like she's a cold-blooded killer and who's had time to think this up, right? So she writes this ransom note in this really bizarre way, but then takes her down to the basement, strangles her. So if he killed her, why the need to strangle her? Because she was clearly alive when she was strangled, because there would be no petechial hemorrhaging and no bruising. If it killed her instantly, right? He hit her and it killed her instantly. There would be no or very little bruising of the site itself. There would be, there'd certainly be no particular hemorrhaging on the strangle site or in her face or in her eyes. And why sexually assault her? Because that also happened when she was alive. So I don't know. I don't know what I'll tell you. Anyway, let's carry on.
Look at Gary for another 3 years after that.
John, let me ask you, do you remember having any interaction with him? Because he seems, he's hanging around Boulder, he's going to vigils, and I don't know if maybe he was even spotted before all of this.
No, Princess, no. The Ramseys did it theorists say that it was Patsy that made the garrote. So Burke accidentally hit her over the head with a torch and killed her because siblings do fight. But then Patsy went to all the absolute trauma of garroting her own daughter while she was still alive. Come on. Do you know the most common way? Now, I don't know how many studies have actually been done on this, but a common way of killing a child. Not essaying them, unless you're an absolute weirdo. You wouldn't think of doing that. And not garroting them with a cord that has DNA from an unknown person on it, but that's something else. So to finish her off, that's what they did. That's what Patsy decided to do. While John was sleeping and Burke was what? Burke was completely traumatized. Smothering. Thank you, Beach Fairy. Smothering. Should have been smothered. Wasn't JonBenet put into pageants? Yes. Possibly some crazy competitive stage mum or dad to do this. It would have to be a real weirdo. Have to be a real weirdo to do it the way they did it. To do it the way they did it. I mean, look, it wasn't a quick kill. This was a horrible way to die. This was a torturous way to die. Very painful. This is either a complete sicko or it's because they're a necrophiliac and just an absolute pervert, or it's somebody who has real hatred for the family to do that. Another parent, just because they didn't like JonBenet because she won, I don't know, they go to those horrible, horrible lengths, honestly. I mean, it's sick. But anyway.
Before JonBenet was murdered.
Well, I don't know of any interaction I had with him. I don't recall any. Boulder's got a lot of weirdos walking around. We came to learn, and he was one of them. No, Howie, John Douglas, who started the whole FBI crime profiling program, we met with him really for four or 5 days early on, and he pretty quickly said, "Look, there's no question you guys didn't do this," but his assessment.
Yeah. Rach, just Rach. Gary Oliva. Gary. That's Gary there on the screen. Yes, he did. He used a telephone cord to strangle his own mother. Yes, he did. He didn't kill her, but he attempted to strangle his own mother with a telephone cord. So that's another kind of circumstantially, it's another kind of tick, if you will, to this guy, Gary, potentially doing it because she was murdered with a cord. How old was Gary Oliva in 1996? About 32, I think. Early 30s. There was a lot of rage. Yes, there was. A lot of rage. A lot of rage.
But this was somebody who was angry or jealous of me. And that was a hard pill to swallow. And he said, well, you may not even know him. We were in the paper that couple of weeks before. Our company had achieved a sales milestone, and our marketing lady wanted to put it in the paper. And I had a gut feeling that was a bad idea, but I went ahead and let her do it anyway, because I wanted our employees to be proud of what they'd accomplished. And
so there he's talking about the PR for the company, of the fact that they did so well, and the PR people put it in the paper, and he thought it was a bad idea. So the fact that anybody outside of the family, including this dude Gary Oliva, would have known that to write this bizarre ransom note, well, it was in the public domain. So all you would have had to have do was see that in the paper and incorporate it into your weird ransom note. So again, that's not secret to the whole family. The local community knew about how well this company was doing and knew the bonuses that the kind of head people were getting. How many nights before was the Christmas decoration public walkthrough at the house again? I didn't used to know that. It was a few days before Christmas. But I think that whoever it was, whether it was this guy or another, whoever it was, I think they'd been in that house before. But who wrote the ransom note? Well, the killer. But it's a sick joke, did it? Somebody who maybe intended to kidnap her and did it as a kind of some sick kind of joke, and then decided not to take her once she was dead. They decided not to take her. But this guy, Gary, was into dead bodies, so perhaps if it was him, he would have taken her. But then again, you've got to think about the practicalities of getting her away from the area. So yeah, there's that John Mark Carr. Yeah, he confessed. There's a lot of this. This is why law enforcement hold a lot of details back in murder cases, because they know that there's sick people who fantasize about doing it and will confess to it, either because they're sick to add to the fantasy of police interrogation, or because they're just weird. So that's why they keep a lot back. But this was actually the first guy to confess, because he confessed on the very day that JonBenet was murdered. He was the first guy to confess. But the one now that the media are all focusing on, thinking it's some kind of new confession, and it's not. I think Burke is, when he was on Dr. Phil, I think he was just very, very awkward. And a lot of people smile inappropriately when they're nervous. I mean, if you watch my live stream this afternoon on the Rex dude, whose surname escapes me at this moment in time, but the Long Island serial killer, they interviewed neighbors, and there was this woman who was one of his neighbors who was smiling, or like she looked gleeful that she was being interviewed, and she wasn't gleeful. She was nervous and shocked. People smile for strange reasons. Can they not replicate DNA now? No, they can't do that, because you have to have a decent sample to be able to do anything with it. Because if you try to replicate it and it's a degraded sample, then what you're doing is replicating degradation. So no, it's not as easy as it sounds. So is it not better to save what little is left until the time that DNA technology has improved again to make it easier for them to deal with a degraded sample? That's right, Teffy, the water gypsy. Your mate laughs when she hears bad news. I kind of smile when it's strange. Like some people will, and it's kind of a joke, you know, like a joke. Like comedians will use it, that some people laugh at funerals because instead of crying, they have this emotional response, but it comes out as a laugh. So mitochondrial DNA can be sequenced and saved. Mitochondrial is easier to extract. I talked about that at length this afternoon in relation to the Long Island serial killer, because it was mitochondrial DNA that they sequenced. Mitochondrial DNA is fine, but if they wanted to do investigative genetic genealogy, then mitochondrial DNA is pointless, because they need nuclear DNA and they need a decent sample of nuclear DNA to do the SNP testing. Mitochondrial DNA can be used to compare samples. So if this guy had the same, so Gary, who's on your screen now, if he had the same mitochondrial haplogroup as the sample in JonBenet's underwear, then that's interesting. That's very interesting. But according to the US Sun, this guy doesn't match. So I don't know. But John Ramsey says that he wasn't tested. So I don't know. I don't know who's telling the truth.
I don't know if that targeted me, but John Douglas said this is not about JonBenet. This was because someone is very angry at you or very jealous of you, and you probably may not even know them. So
in your investigation,
the police asked me earlier on.
In your investigation, were you able to uncover anything else about Gary Oliva?
No, not really. What we don't know is if the police ever took his DNA and tested it against the sample they got in early 1997. So we don't know if that was done. What we've been advocating is, in this Gilgo case I read about really just today, that they assembled a task force to reinvigorate the investigation. And that's really what we're asking the governor to make happen in Colorado. We've been told by the FBI that the government, from the FBI on down, does not have the latest DNA testing technology yet.
And that's a problem. That is a problem. If Colorado don't have the most up-to-date testing methods, that is a problem. Because maybe there's more up-to-date testing methods that have not even been tried. So they need to get this sample somewhere, this remaining sample somewhere, where it could be tested, maybe using the most latest methods. Yeah, gallows humor is a way of dealing with seeing people killed on the gallows. Yeah, and gallows humor, like police officers will laugh and joke amongst themselves, and it would seem completely inappropriate to be laughing at a murder scene or to be laughing when a dead body's being extracted from somewhere. But it's gallows humor. It's a way of dealing with those uncomfortable feelings. Doctors and nurses do it. You know, they're dealing with traumatic incidents. They have this way of diffusing this trauma for themselves, which only makes sense to them. Like my cousin is a paramedic, and some of the stuff he says, honestly, you know, it's funny, and I get it, because I'm not. I have gallows humor. So the stuff he says that I find hilarious, but people would not find it hilarious if you realize that. If you didn't realize that it was anything other than dealing with, making light of a situation that is very emotional. Thank you, Mike, for the $10. Thank you. So I'm wondering, given this, I'm wondering whether the test that was done, the tests against CODIS, if they've not been done using up-to-date techniques, then perhaps it does need to be redone with the most up-to-date techniques. I don't know, guys, because we've got to remember that this was 1996. Look how far technology has increased since 1996. I think they should at least consult with the labs that have the most up-to-date technology. And if the labs that have the most up-to-date technology say, no, this is not appropriate at this moment in time, because we've no guarantees at this moment in time, so save what is left, because, you know, in the near future, we're going to have even better methods. No, the police won't give it up. This is the thing. John Ramsey wants the Boulder police to release everything so that he can deal with it, so that they can send it somewhere else to have it retested. I mean, look at the labs. The way that the police, the FBI, in the Long Island serial killer case, have all come together in a case that was floundering, in a case that was cold. A new team has come in. They've left their egos at the door. They've come in a case that's over a decade old. And within 2 months of that team taking over, they had a suspect. They were surveilling the suspect for over a year. And the amount of information that they've got on that suspect is outstandingly good. Go and listen to my live from this afternoon, where I go through the entire indictment. It's outstandingly good research that they've done. And what they did, they realized that the DNA samples they had were from single hairs on the victims' bodies, or on the tape that was binding the victims. And they realized there wasn't enough DNA in one single hair, but they sent it to the best quality labs that they could. They sent it to an independent, they sent it to two independent labs, which had the most up-to-date technology. Didn't try to do it themselves and mess it up. And they got mitochondrial DNA, which matched to both the killer himself and the killer's wife. So it meant that these women were tied up or bound up in a place where his wife had been. His wife was out of state, but it's not her. Don't start any conspiracies. But Boulder PD from day one have been ridiculous. And now they cannot take their ego away from this situation and let the most up-to-date people deal with this now. It's crazy. At least consult. And if a lab says, no, there's not enough, we'll mess it up, you know, we've not got the technology at this moment in time, then fair enough. But at least they've tried. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
There are one or two labs in the country that are cutting edge capable. And they've told us that's where these samples that have not been tested or the old samples that were tested 25 years ago need to go and retest for DNA sampling. And then if we get a good sample result, go to the public genealogy database and search in that database and develop a family tree and work it backwards. And that's been wildly successful in solving some old cold cases.
Oh, absolutely.
The first one I read, yeah. And we're just advocating that they do those.
It has. But as I said, the genetic genealogy requires SNP testing. So they have to have a decent sample of nuclear DNA. But again, the most up-to-date labs will be able to inform on whether it was possible, at least put John's mind at rest and say, look, John, it's not possible with our current technology. We can't do SNP testing because the DNA is either not sufficient or it's too degraded to be able to replicate it. But what they absolutely could do is retest what they've already done. Retest what they've already done. And potentially, if that's too degraded, if what's remaining is too degraded for standard DNA testing, then go to mitochondrial DNA testing. I mean, I don't know what to tell these people. And if all of that fails, if the lab then says, no, I'm sorry, it's too degraded, just hang fire, because maybe in another 5 years, we'll have better technology, because technology is advancing so fast in forensic science, in biology. DNA testing has come on so much, even in the last 10 years. So in another 10 years, they will be able to use probably microscopic samples and be sufficiently, you know, to replicate it and get a decent sample from it. But at least put John's mind at rest. I mean, he's 79 years old. This guy deserves some answers.
Those two things, very simple. And yeah, it's a lot of work. We've actually had a benefactor, an unknown benefactor, come forward and say, I'll pay for it. If the police and the county and the city have a problem with money, I will pay for it. I don't know who this man is, but it's been offered. So it can't be money. You know, the Boulder police have gone through 3 or 4 chief police heads since this case took place. And only recently did they hire a chief of police from outside the system and an assistant chief from outside the system. And that was a good move in our mind. The culture needed to change. The detective who was on our case for 25 years was recommended for termination by the police review board. He was not terminated. He was put on night patrol, but he was removed from our case. I don't know who within the police department under this new leadership who is even handling our case now, but we need to bring in more resources.
Yeah, and the task force,
I really believe
the task force is exactly how they did it in Long Island. And, you know, within in a case that's decades old or more than a decade old, within a few months, they had their eye on someone.
In 2 months. In 2 months. The task force took over in January 2022, In March 2022, they had a suspect that they were able to surveil, followed him around like the Men in Black. So it's absolutely possible that JonBenet's killer could be brought to justice after all these years if Boulder PD actually got their finger out. There was a comment which I'd not thought of, but it's scarily possible. Hold on a minute. Journey takes a trip. It's possible that Boulder PD don't even have the DNA anymore, and that's why they're refusing. They were so desperate to pin the parents, maybe they got rid of it or just lost it through incompetence. That is very possible. That's very possible. Is there any proof that these DNA samples even still exist? We're told that they are. John Ramsey's told that they are. But what if they're not? What if they're not? And I think Boulder PD have been playing silly beggars with this case because they know so badly how they messed up. They know so badly how they messed up. And now they can't deal with it.
It was amazing putting the resources plus all the advances in DNA.
No, I am really convinced that this would bring this to a conclusion with that effort made. This Idaho tragedy where 3 students were murdered. First thing I did was look and see how big Moscow, Idaho was, 30,000 people. I thought, oh boy, they're headed for potentially another Boulder, Colorado, where they've got arrogant, we're in charge here, never had any experience doing this, but we'll figure it out. They didn't. They brought in everybody they could get their hands on, the FBI, the state police, and they had it solved within 2 or 3 weeks.
It was amazing.
They did. They had a suspect very quickly. We didn't know that they were following Brian Koberger. We didn't know that they had a suspect. But yeah, the Idaho 4. So they were murdered on November 13th. And then Koberger was arrested on the end of December, the 30th of December, sometime around there. So only about 6 weeks before an arrest was made. And if you look at the evidence that they got in the PCA, they got quite a bit of evidence in those 6 weeks. December 30th, thank you. Thought it was. I just couldn't remember. Yeah. Because probably, partly, I think probably the university was really pushing for the local PD to get this done, get this solved. In any university town, they have a huge sway amongst the, law enforcement and community leaders, but they brought in everybody. The world and his wife descended upon Moscow, Idaho. The FBI, they had all those forensic tests. They had the state-of-the-art crime scene analysis people there. They went through that entire house and the yard, everything with a fine-tooth comb. They got a whole bunch of surveillance. I mean, all right, this was 1996. So, things like ring doorbells and surveillance cameras, that people put up in their homes didn't exist then. But they did nothing. Why they can't bring in the best now? Because they're trying to save face. They realise that they were so badly inadequate and they don't want to admit it. Obviously, that's just my opinion, but that's just very much what it looks like to me.
And boy, I give them credit for doing the right thing. And that's what should have happened in our case.
Absolutely.
And yet that help that was out there and offered was refused.
John Ramsey's going to stay with us. We've got more to talk to with him about, including the friend of Oliva, the one who made the call to police, the one who got the letters. What do we know about him? Plus, coming up next hour.
Let's move forward. So a little bit about Gary Oliva. So again, you can, if you haven't seen this already, you can just go to the link in the description box and watch it all. So I'm just skipping to John's bits. So that's the stuff from the US Sun. All right, back.
Conversation or spoken to him?
No, I did not know him. I know of him based on this call that he reported, but I've not talked to him either. You know, it's hugely significant if that call was made before the news was public, in my opinion.
It is interesting. It is interesting. But as I said before, it could be because Gary Oliva was in the local area that he heard about the murder before it hit the media. Yes, Gayla, they allowed the father to go and search for JonBenet, and he picked her up and brought her upstairs, didn't he? Yes, absolutely. Completely disrupted the crime scene. Yeah.
And that's, I think, I don't know if the Sun has verified that or not, but that is very significant if the call was made before we found JonBenet and it was reported. You know, we had 2 or 3 other confessions, one of which you mentioned, John Mark Carr, very odd, very compelling confession. The district attorney did arrest him and the DNA did not match. I had another fellow call our minister and say, I want to confess, but first I want to talk to Mr. Ramsey. I talked to him for, gosh, I don't know, an hour probably. And in the end, he said, well, send me money so I can buy airline tickets to fly to Boulder to turn myself in. And I would, you know, was going to take a risk and do it. And my attorney said, no way, we're not sending this guy money. And our investigators checked him out and he was just trying to get me to send him money. And we would have never heard from him again, I suspect. So it was.
How cruel are some people? That is just very, very cruel. For what, probably a few $100s? Was a note on a notepad that was already in the home? Yes, allegedly it was. Yes, it was paper that was already in the home. So it was written in the home, allegedly.
Legitimate. Well, there was some, you know, anytime, and I've talked to a lot of people on this that call or have information or think they have information. And I'm always looking for that silver bullet, the piece that's not been out in the media. And if they have that, then that's important.
Yeah, and that's, you know, investigators.
So much without the media.
Right. Investigators always try to hold some things back. So when they get the confessions, especially in these high profile cases, that, oh, how only the killer would know that, you know, because we never told anyone that. And I've seen people, you know, caught and prosecuted that way. In this one, though, it seems, you know, if there is an allegation these phone calls were made, I don't know how long phone records are kept. I mean, it's been a long time. If you could put any of this together, at this point, it probably comes down to the credibility of this man, Michael Vale. I want to read.
Yeah, I mean, 1996, they're probably not going to have the phone records. What guy was in prison? This guy on your screen, Gary Oliva. He's been in prison since 2016 on child P charges. He's eligible for parole in 2025. In my opinion, he should never be released. Hold on a minute. Oh, dear me. Callie, I didn't know that. Brandy is still receiving fake ransoms from Michael. Some people are just evil. That's awful. Awful. Dear me. Dear me. Oh, which the guy? that guy was in prison at the time of the crime. Which guy? That's right. Ellie should never have allowed anyone to search the house. No, they shouldn't. Because they didn't know it was going to be a murder investigation, but they absolutely knew it was a kidnapping situation because they had a ransom note. So oh, the guy that tried to extort the Ramseys. Oh, really? All right. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. But yeah, there was a comment that I can't find now, but someone said, prosecute these people for making like false confessions. And yeah, well, someone was prosecuted in my country. This was back when the Yorkshire Ripper was doing the rounds. This is in the 1970s. And somebody was making tapes and sending them in to the police chief. And it completely upended the investigation. And it sent the police off on an absolute wild goose chase. And when they caught him, they prosecuted him. I think he did 2 years in prison for it, for making false confessions, sending these tapes in to the police chief. Because it really, people died. People died. Murders were conducted because Peter Sutcliffe wasn't caught because the police were off chasing a wild goose chase. Thank you, Rona, for the $9.99. Thank you, thank you. Wearside Jack, that's the one. Yes, Wearside Jack. They were looking for someone with a Geordie accent. And Peter Sutcliffe had a Yorkshire accent. Yeah.
It's some more from the U.S. Sun report. 3 years after his arrest, Oliva penned a series of odd and disturbing letters to Vail claiming to have killed JonBenet by accident. In one of the letters, which Vail shared with the U.S. Sun, Oliva wrote, "I never loved anyone like I did JonBenet, and yet I let her slip and her head bashed in half and I watched her die. It was an accident. Please believe me, she was not like the other kids." I guess the other thing about Oliva is he has this history with child pornography and a 7-year-old girl that, is another reason why he seems to be someone who needs to be looked at very, very closely, John.
No, I agree. He was right at the top of my list when I heard the circumstantial information about him. And other than we don't know if the DNA was checked or not, but yeah, he's certainly not off my list at all.
He's not off my list either. Like, there's a lot of coincidences and things if this isn't the guy, but I don't know. Sorry, Vibes. Sunderland, not Geordie. Yeah, I get peed off when people say I've got a Yorkshire accent and not a Lancashire one. So yeah, he was from Sunderland. Peter Sutcliffe did have a few lucky escapes. He absolutely did. Yeah, he absolutely did. Yeah. Yeah, accidental strangulation. Well, I think the accident was her bashing her head. But
now, the relationship between these two, again, people are wondering, like, who is this guy, Michael Vail? What is the nature of the relationship? Here's a little bit more about that. After graduating high school, and they're both from California, Oliva started writing to Vail, sharing updates about his life, which prompted this exchange of mail between the pair, because back in the old days, we used to send letters to each other. Their correspondence started off innocently enough, but sometime around 1989, the subject of his messages became dark and disturbing, making mention of blood murder, cannibalism, and even child rape. So obviously he's disturbed in some respect. Would you be interested in talking to this guy, Vale, or having hearing from him directly, or do you want to leave that in the hands of investigators at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly be willing to, but I think a good investigator would be better equipped to talk to him. I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and I appreciate the interest and the attempt to help. I've got a couple calls right now that I need to return for people that have called and said, I want to talk to you about some information I have. And, I'll always talk to them, because you never know.
At this point, I think people who just heard what you said would be, wow, you're still getting calls after all these years. How much, and I know you loved your daughter, and, family is like everything, right?
Yeah.
What happened to JonBenet, how much of this do you carry day in and day out for all these years? I mean, I mean, for us, like, we know, you say the name, we know the story, and we we think about it, we can picture her face. I mean, you're her dad. How has this long journey been?
Well, you don't get over the loss of a child as a parent. There's no more painful thing in life for a parent than to lose a child. I've lost 2 daughters, and you don't get over it. You move on. You find a reason to move on. And our primary reason for moving on for Patsy and I was we still had 3 children that loved us dearly and needed us to be strong. And Patsy and I used to say, when we'd both get down and just really depressed, but okay, wait, let's not have a pity party here. Let's get up off the floor and get moving. And so we were fortunate that we both had that perspective, I guess. A majority of marriages end up in divorce after the loss of a child like this. There's the question of blame, well, why did you let Jimmy have the car that night? I told you that was a bad idea. Or why did you let your daughter go out? Or why didn't you check the locks? There's a blame. And then also just you get stuck in a valley of just sadness, and it's tough to get out of.
He's very brave. He's very brave. So he had a family before Patsy. So he had children from a previous relationship, and it was one of his daughters from the previous relationship. So one of his older children who died in an accident. And then he had, with Patsy, he had Burke and JonBenet. So they had Burke, and then he had 2 other kids from a previous relationship. So that's what he's talking about. Yeah, Mel. Accidentally smashed her head against the floor, accidentally garroted her after some essay, and then she accidentally died. It was all accidental. Yeah, I mean, if this is the guy, then he's deflecting at the very, very least. Yeah, so the head wound was internal. So the autopsy report, I have got the autopsy report. I mean, I could go through the entire autopsy report if you would like me to in a separate video. I have an entire playlist on autopsies, so I can definitely do that in a separate video if you want me to. But regarding the fracture, she had a scalp contusion, so she had bruising on the outside. The bleeding was inside. The bleeding was in the membrane, so between the scalp and the brain. And that area does not bleed a lot. That brain does not bleed a lot. But when it does bleed, it's devastating on brain function. And then there was a fracture. So comminuted means that it's a fracture in more than one place. So like when you break a bone in more than one place. So if you're hit on the head or you fall on your head, you tend to have the type of fracture that shatters the skull in that place, rather than a clean one line, just for the shape of the head, really. So, yeah, there was no bleeding to the outside. The bleeding was inside. So that's just responding to questions there.
But we had 3 children that needed us, that were alive and needed us to be strong, and that's really why I'm fighting so hard to get the government to do the right thing here. Finding JonBenet's killer is not going to change my life. It's going to close a chapter, but it's going to change the lives of my children and my grandchildren. This chapter needs to be closed for their sake. And that's the primary. I dealt with this early on, and I told people, I said, I knew that if you put me in the room with this creature, we wouldn't need a trial. He wouldn't come out alive.
Good for him. Good for him.
And I knew that was not the right thing to think, but that's how I felt. And then it took me 3 or 4 or 5 years to deal with the whole concept of forgiveness. How do you forgive? And I went through several iterations of progress to that. And I realized that forgiveness is really a gift you give yourself. It's a release from that anger and desire for revenge. Do I still want absolute justice for this creature? Yes. But I let my life move on. And that's what really forgiveness is. It's a gift you give yourself.
All right, John Ramsey's going to stay with us. When we come back, we'll talk about the scene. We'll return to the scene and talk about.
Okay, we're going to return to the scene. It does an advert here, so let's move. There's not much more actually left on John. It's a very interesting program though, so 37.5 minutes well spent if you haven't watched this, if you haven't watched it all. So back to John here. It's worth a watch though. He's dealt with it so brave, given just the amount of flack that they've taken, the fact that a grand jury indicted them even, and just so stressful. I mean, but you get those parents who just have this strength. They have this inner strength to keep them going and keep them fighting for justice. Look at Brandy in relation to the Michael Vaughan case. I mean, just how strong she has been over the last 2 years. It's unbelievable. But yet, some parents can't. They just go to pieces. But some can, and you've got to hand it to them. It's just dogged bravery that they're going to do that one last thing for the child, and that's to get justice for them.
And there's a lot of people who know a lot about this story who are watching, but there's some who don't know a lot. How could the killer have gotten into the house? What sort of conclusions have you come to in your mind?
Well, it was an old house. It was built in 1927. It had been added on to by previous owners, so it was kind of a.
I'll just answer this couple of questions and then I'll let it run through to the end. Then, yeah, Stephen Lawrence's parents, absolutely, yeah, If you're in the UK, you'll know the Stephen Lawrence case. Yeah. Laurie, why did he move her body, and why did they start telling people to come over? Because they were very gregarious social people, and they were panicking. They thought their daughter had been kidnapped, and they wanted their friends around them. And that was completely the wrong thing to do. And when the cops arrived, they should have made them all go home. He moved her body because it was an instinctive reaction. I mean, come on, you know, he's a dad. He finds his 6-year-old daughter lying murdered on the basement floor. What is the impulsive thing to do? Even if you know better in hindsight, what's the instinctive thing to do? It's to pick her up and take her upstairs and say, I found her. She's here. She's dead. Please help save her. You know, it's just that instinctive thing to do. It would take a real insight, like somebody not behaving emotionally, to step away and say, I found her and I can't touch anything. The 99.9% of parents in that situation would pick their child up and cradle her and want to try to save her. In shock, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. He should never have been put in that position. The police should never have put in that position. It's one of the reasons why actual police forces who know how to deal with these things don't let the parents go to search for missing children. They don't let them go to search in case the parents find them. Because if they find them deceased, the instinctive thing to do is to pick them up and cradle them. And it's completely the wrong thing to do. Searching has got to be, it's got to have that level of detachment. And no, the police can't stop a parent going searching, but they strongly recommend against it. Because they can't have that. They can't have that crime scene be contaminated. But yet Boulder PD didn't care. Well, they did. I'm not saying they didn't care, but they just didn't know any better. Just incredibly bad policing. Very bad policing.
Mishmash of rooms and doors and windows and you know, as you said, we thought we lived in a very peaceful, safe community, and we were naive, and so we didn't check every door to make sure that they were locked. We didn't lock every window and check the locks. That day, the 25th, kids are in and out of the house all day long, playing with new toys, and you know, their friends were over, and you know, it wouldn't have been difficult. I did, when the police asked me to go through the house and see if I could find anything out of the ordinary, I went to the basement, and there was a window that was open, and one of the panes of glass was broken, and there was a suitcase under the window propped up as if it were a step. And I told the police that morning, I said, look, I think I broke the window last summer. I was locked out. I had to get in the house. That was the way I got in. But that window should not have been unlocked and open as it was, because it was the middle of winter. And more importantly, the suitcase didn't belong there. It was out of place. It was put up, set under the window as if it were a stepping, you know, stool to get out the window. And I told the police that very early on. And so that certainly was one way that possibly could have provided an entrance or exit. There was also a door found wide open, which I didn't know about, but it was found by the police when they came that morning. The bottom floor of that house had 5 doors to the outside. And just because of the way it was built and how it evolved over time. And one of those doors was found wide open. It was an out of the way door, but it was on the side of the house. So And we didn't set the burglar alarm. We just thought we were safe. JonBenet set off the burglar alarm when we first moved in. It was one of these alarms that the theory was it was so loud you couldn't stand to be in the house, and it would make the burglar flee. Well, she set it off, punching the buttons, and it went off one Friday afternoon, and it was horrible. It was just this blasting sound, and I running into where the keyboard was. She says, "This makes my ears loud." Yeah, it's pretty loud. So we didn't use it, and we didn't think we needed it. But boy, we were naive. We were ignorant of the eccentric characters that lived in Boulder. There were a lot of them.
Certainly. And I guess the last thing, and I think a lot of viewers are probably thinking this now too. So there's the letter that's left, and there's this guy, Gary Oliva, who apparently writes a lot of letters. Do you know if there's ever been a comparison done in the handwriting?
Not to my knowledge, and that's should be done. I mean, we were told by legitimate handwriting experts with the 3-page ransom note, that's a huge sample, and we can positively identify the writer with that much sample. And I don't know if that's ever been done with Oliva.
All right. Well, John,
it was done. Patsy and I did all that.
You did it, right? They had you do a bunch of them, right?
Yeah, we wrote that left upside down, right-handed, left-handed, for samples, you know.
Right.
And,
well, John,
so.
I appreciate you coming on tonight. You know, these headlines, I guess you got a couple calls you've got to return. People still calling you with information. And let's just hope that someday when we're talking again, we're talking about a trial. John Ramsey, thanks so much.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I hope that eventually we talk about a trial. Wouldn't that be just brilliant? It's one of the cases that I really, really hope gets solved in my lifetime. You know, 25 years, and I hope it's solved in John's lifetime. More importantly than mine, it's solved in John's lifetime, and because he's done so much, and he deserves answers. He really does, and I think answers are possible if whatever cops are holding things back take their egos out of the equation and allow a completely new investigation. And yes, there's so much been lost in those years, but anything's possible with new technology. Absolutely anything is possible. And it's just so sad. JonBenet's case and Madeleine McCann, I'd really like to see those two cases cracked and solved. I really would. Take it they never found the weapon. No, they don't know what was used to fracture her skull. Yeah, Mark, this one and Madeleine, yeah. What about the 911 call phone from their house before they hung up? Then Patty called in early AM. Yeah, Patsy called, yeah. Patsy called. That's right. The news about the company and the bonuses was in the media. Yeah. And Gary Oliva, I am going to sign off in a minute, but Gary Oliva's contact with the local environment was very close. This article has a map. Here we are. So this guy was kind of homeless on and off. He was originally from California, but he seemed to like flip from state to state. So he spent time in Colorado, time in Oregon, probably time in other areas as well. And he was actually having his mail delivered to the church. So the Patsy's lived here and the church was here. So it's literally down the road and right there. So very close, just literally down the road. So that's how close a connection that he potentially had. So very easily could just walk past, see JonBenet, knew exactly where she lived. I think that whoever it was getting in and out of that house, knew exactly, planned it all out, knew exactly how to get JonBenet, where to take her. And I think the ransom note was a sick joke, honestly. Or it could have been a ruse because the killer did intend to take JonBenet, but then decided for whatever reason not to. Absolutely, Mel. Summer Wells, yeah. We all want an answer to Summer Wells. We all do. But it's these really old cases that go on for decades that you just think someday there's got to be an answer. Someday. Anyway, guys, I am going to go because I have been on here for nearly 2 hours. Did 2.5 hours this afternoon. I've been on here for 2 hours. So I've done a lot of talking today. And Ben Needham. Oh, wow. That's a case that I haven't thought of in ages. Ben Needham, yeah. What happened to Ben? Yeah, just cruel, the ransom note. Cruel. All right, guys, I am going to go. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you've been to both of the live streams that I've done today, congratulations. 2 completely different cases. And yeah, going to be following developments in this case to see if anything comes from this Gary Oliva and the fact that the media have picked up on this, and maybe it'll inspire something to happen. I doubt it, but we can always hope. And I'll certainly be following the developments in New York in relation to the Long Island serial killer, because that is fabulous news. Fabulous news. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, as always, for being polite and respectful. I hope that it's given you some things to think about, and definitely check out the Court TV piece. It's good. And I'll put the US Sun link in as well so that you can have a read of the article. It's quite a long article. I did read it on the previous live on Thursday, but I'll put the link in again. Thanks as always to the mods, and thank you very much for the donations. Always very appreciated. And I shall see you very soon. I'll be back with a video tomorrow. Bye, guys.